Have you ever felt an emptiness that only an animal seems to understand? In the vastness of the Masai Mara savanna in Kenya, a lion named Kwezi, with a golden mane that seemed to catch fire under the sun, lived a story that changed hearts forever. He wasn't just a predator. He was a king, a symbol of strength with a moon-shaped scar on his face that told tales of battles won. But what happened when time stole his roar? This story isn't just about a lion. It's about compassion, dignity, and bonds that bridge the gap between humans and nature. Can you believe an animal can teach what it means to be human? Picture the dry heat of the savanna, the scent of scorched earth rising with the breeze. Kwezi ruled there, his amber eyes glowing as if they held the universe's secrets. He protected cubs, faced rivals, and inspired even the farmers who feared his shadow. But years later, something unexpected happened. Something that made even the hardest hearts in the village tremble with emotion. Want to know what it was? Come with me because this story will grab you. If you love tales that blend courage and tenderness, give this a like and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Let's dive into Kwezi's journey, a lion who, even weakened, showed that true strength comes from the soul. Pause for a moment and imagine. A proud lion, his mane swaying in the wind. What did fate have in store for him? In the boundless Masai Mara, where the horizon seems to swallow the sky, Kwezi reigned as if born from the sun's own flames. His golden mane fluttered like a crown, and the deep rumble of his roar echoed through the hills, silencing even the birds. He wasn't just a lion, he was a living legend, with a moon-shaped scar on his face that told stories of battles against hyenas and rivals. Have you ever seen an animal that seems to carry the weight of a kingdom on its shoulders? That's what Kwezi was like, and the Maasai herders whispered his name with a mix of fear and reverence. But time, that old trickster, was already lurking in the shadows. In his youth, Kwezi led his pride with a blend of strength and grace. He guarded cubs with a gaze so steady that even the wind seemed to obey. The smell of dry grass mingled with the warmth of his body as he patrolled the savanna, his amber eyes glowing like embers. Once they say he faced 3 rival lions alone, and the dust kicked up by the fight hung in the air for hours. Can you believe that kind of courage? The villagers shared these feats around campfires, and Kwezi became more than a predator. He was a symbol of dignity, a king who seemed touched by something greater. But no one, not even a king, escapes aging. The years began to weigh on him. First, it was a slower step. Then his once lush mane grew thin, like grass after a drought. Kwezi's roar, which once shook the ground, now came out hoarse, almost a lament. He lost his pride to a younger lion, and the savanna, so familiar, became a maze of loneliness. Under a starry sky, the rustle of leaves seemed to mock his weakness. Who hasn't felt the weight of watching what once was slipped through their fingers? Kwezi wandered, gaunt and tired, fighting for survival. Yet there was something in his posture, a proud stubbornness, that made you believe he wouldn't give up. Hunger gnawed at him, and Kwezi began venturing closer to the villages. The farmers, who once feared him, now saw him as a shadow of his former self. Some threw stones, others just watched, with pity. The tinkling of goat bells in the distance was a cruel invitation for a lion who could barely hunt. But, you know, what's amazing? Even so weak, Kwezi never attacked the livestock. It was as if he knew his dignity was worth more than an easy meal. Maybe it was a sign from the universe, proof that even in defeat, there's greatness. And that's when something started to shift in the villagers' hearts. On the edge of the Masai Mara, where mud villages nestle among hills, the farmers lived, with one eye on their livestock and the other on the savanna's shadows. Kwezi, the lion who was once a thunderstorm, was now just a gaunt figure appearing at dawn with steps so light they barely stirred the dust. The aroma of smoke from morning fires hung in the air, mixed with the cold dew dripping from acacias. At first, the villagers eyed him warily. A lion, even an old one, is still a lion, right? But there was something in Kwezi's eyes, a weary calm, almost human, that began to stir them. Have you ever felt an animal looking at you as if it knew your soul? Slowly, the tension gave way to a quiet respect. An old herder, Mama Aisha, was the first to notice that Queasy never touched the goats, even starving. She began leaving bits of meat on his path, hidden behind a bush, like an offering she didn't want seen. The sound of goat horns clacking together echoed as Queasy ate, and Mama Aisha smiled, as if sharing a secret with the savanna. Can you imagine such a thing? A lion and a village starting to understand each other without a word. It was as if compassion had built a bridge where fear once stood. And others followed her lead. The younger ones, who used to run with spears, now watched Queasy from afar, fascinated. A boy, Quito, swore the lion once stared at him and winked as if saying, "I'm cool. Laugh if you want." But those stories spread through the village, softening people's hearts. The midday heat made the air shimmer, but Queasy seemed to bring a breeze of empathy. Even the toughest, like the farmer Lemayan, stopped throwing stones. "He's like us, fighting to live," Lemayan muttered once, and those words stuck in. The village. Who'd have thought a lion could teach so much without opening its mouth? Maybe it was the universe whispering that everyone, man or beast, seeks the same thing, a bit of peace. That silent bond grew, and the village began to see Queasy not as a threat but as part of their story. Some even called him grandfather of the savanna, with a playful fondness. Take a deep breath and picture it, an old lion and an entire village exchanging looks of respect. Can you feel the power of that? But then, fate decided to test that bond in a way no one expected. The Masai Mara that week felt like an oven under the relentless sun. The cracked savanna ground radiated heat that made the air dance, and even the vultures soared higher, as if afraid to touch the earth. Queasy, the lion who was once king, wandered in search of water, each step a struggle that shook his body. He hadn't eaten in days, and hunger clawed deep in his chest. Then, on a sweltering afternoon, he found a muddy pool near a dry stream. Desperate, he tried to cross it, but the mud swallowed him like a cruel trap. His paws sank, and Queasy collapsed, trapped. Have you ever felt the weight of a fight that seems to have no way out? That's how the old lion felt, with survival slipping like sand through his paws. The sun burned without mercy, and the damp smell of mud mixed with Queasy's salty sweat. He roared, but the sound came out weak, a hoarse whimper that barely reached. The trees, hours dragged on, and the lion, exhausted, could hardly move his head. The savanna, once his kingdom, now seemed to mock him, its silence broken only by the buzz of flies. But you know what's incredible? Far off, a boy, Quito, heard that whimper. The kid, who saw Queasy as a grandfather of the savanna, ran to the village shouting for help. The compassion the village felt for the lion was about to be tested. Would they risk everything for an animal that deep down was still wild? When the farmers arrived, what they saw broke their hearts. Queasy, his mane caked with mud, looked smaller, almost swallowed by the earth. His amber eyes, once so vibrant, were dull but still flickered with a thread of hope. The sound of dry twigs snapping under the men's feet echoed as they approached. Hesitant, Mama Aisha, with her firm voice, said, "He trusted us, we can't abandon him now." Who hasn't felt a call from within, as if the universe was asking you to do what's right? The whole village paused, torn between fear and the urge to save the lion who'd won them over. Night fell, and the temperature plummeted, bringing a chill that cut through the skin. Queasy shivered in the mud, each breath a struggle. The farmers gathered, debating what to do. Some wanted to call the rangers, but time was short. Lemayan, the farmer who'd once thrown stones, now held a rope, his face tense. "He's one of us," he murmured, almost to himself. Close your eyes for a second and imagine a trapped lion surrounded by humans he never harmed. Can you feel the weight of that moment? Compassion was alive, but would it be enough to pull Queasy from the mud before it was too late? Under the purple twilight sky of the Masai Mara, the muddy pool where Queasy was trapped looked like a grave of earth. The lion, half swallowed, barely moved, and the savanna's silence was broken only by his faint breathing. Three farmers, Lemayan, Quito, and a young man named Tumo, clutched rough ropes, their faces taut under the dim light. The sour smell of mud clung to their nostrils, mixed with the sweat dripping from their brows. They knew a lion, even dying, still had claws. But compassion spoke louder than fear. Have you ever felt your heart urge you to do something reason calls madness? That's exactly what drove those men. Lemayan, who once saw Queasy as a threat, now led. "Slow, he's scared," he said, as they tied the rope to a stake driven into the hard ground. The sound of stakes pounding echoed, a rhythm almost sacred in the night. Quito, wide-eyed, held a trembling flashlight, illuminating Queasy's mud-caked. "Bani." The lion raised his head, and for a moment his eyes met Lemayan's. You know what's striking? That look held no anger, just a weary trust, as if Queasy knew friends were there. The whole village held its breath, awaiting the next step, in this dance of courage and danger. But the rescue wasn't easy. The mud gripped Queasy like it had a life of its own. Each tug on the rope made the lion groan, and Tumo's heart sank. "Come on, Mimsy, you can do it," he whispered, as if the lion could understand. Suddenly, the rope slipped, and Lemayan nearly fell into the mud. The cold night wind seemed to laugh at them, but no one gave up. Then a truck rumbled down the trail, its headlights cutting through the darkness. It was Jabari, the ranger, with his deep voice and a first aid kit. "You're crazy and amazing," he said with a half smile. Who'd have thought 3 farmers' compassion would call in reinforcements? Jabari joined the effort, guiding the men with calm. They drove more stakes, and with one final pull, Queasy slid from the mud, collapsing onto dry ground. The sound of his heavy body hitting the earth was followed by a collective sigh. Queasy was free, but so weak he barely moved. Jabari knelt beside him, checking his condition. "Pause for a moment and feel this. A lion, 3 farmers, and a ranger, bound by a thread of kindness. Can you imagine the strength of that moment?" The Masai Mara dawned with a fresh breeze, as if the savanna itself exhaled relief after the tense night. Queasy, the lion who'd escaped the mud, lay exhausted under an acacia, his mud-crusted mane plastered to his gaunt body. The morning birdsong sounded like a timid choir celebrating his survival. Jabari, the ranger with kind eyes, was at his side, with a bag full of supplies. He applied medicines with steady hands, while the scent of herbal ointments floated in the air. Queasy raised his head, weak but with a new spark in his amber eyes. Have you ever seen an animal that seems to say, "It's not over yet," without a word? That's what Queasy did, and Jabari felt a pang in his chest. Jabari worked calmly, offering chunks of raw meat that Queasy took slowly, as if rediscovering the taste of life. The sound of water dripping from a bottle Jabari used to hydrate the yaw. Lion echoed softly, mingled with the distant hum of insects. The farmers, now gathered a few yards away, watched in silence, their faces blending exhaustion and hope. Mama Aisha, her colorful shawl fluttering, murmured, "The earth gave him back to us." You know what's incredible? It was as if nature, so harsh at times, had granted Queasy a second chance, and everyone there felt it like a gift. Who hasn't wanted to believe the world still holds some goodness? Little by little, Queasy began to rise. First, his trembling pause, then a hesitant step. The warmth of the rising sun bathed his skin, and he let out a low, hoarse roar, but full of life. The farmers cheered, and even Quito, the boy who'd alerted the village, jumped with joy, shouting, "Mizi's back!" Have you ever felt your heart swell watching someone overcome the impossible? That moment was like that, pure and true. Tourists who heard of the rescue started arriving, snapping photos, but what stayed with them wasn't the lion's image. It was the mutual respect that united humans and nature in that patch of savanna. News of Queasy's recovery spread, and the village became a talking point. People came from afar, not just to see the lion, but to understand how an entire community rallied for him. The rustle of leaves in the breeze seemed to carry these stories, as if the Masai Mara wanted the world to know. Jabari, ever humble, said, "Queasy was the real teacher, showing that hope blooms where there's courage." Pause for a moment and feel this. a lion rising surrounded by admiring gazes. Can you imagine the power of that moment? In the Masai Mara, where the sunset paints the sky orange and gold, Kwesi walked with slow but steady steps, as if he knew his story was far from over. The scent of wet earth rose after a light rain, and the distant rumble of thunder seemed to applaud his return. He was no longer the fierce king of old, but he carried a dignity that made even the zebras pause to look. The village now saw him as a living symbol of solidarity, a lion who united hearts where fear once stood. Have you ever felt a story could change how you see the world? Because that's exactly what Kwesi was doing, without ever roaring a word. The cow. Farmers vowed to watch over him, leaving water and scraps of meat on the trails he crossed. Mama Aisha, with her wrinkled smile, said Kwesi was the guardian of our soul. The crackle of a village campfire echoed at night as they shared his tales, mixing laughter and sighs. Even Kito, the boy who'd sounded the alarm, dreamed, becoming a ranger like Jabari, inspired by the lion he called Mzi. You know what's beautiful? Kwesi's legacy wasn't in his fangs or strength, but in the lesson that kindness can build bonds stronger than any chain. And the Masai Mara seemed to whisper that with every breeze. Tourists kept coming, bringing cameras but leaving with stories. They told the world how an old lion in a humble village showed that dignity doesn't age. The sound of children's laughter rang out as kids ran to point out where Kwesi was last seen. Jabari, always nearby, noted each sighting with quiet pride. Who hasn't wanted to be part of something bigger, something that lingers in the memory of generations? Kwesi, with his thinning mane and moon-shaped scar, became that bridge, uniting humans and nature in a respect that felt eternal. Sometimes Kwesi would stop atop a hill, gazing at the horizon as if thanking the savanna. The soft glow of moonlight on his silhouette made the farmers whisper that he was speaking with the spirits of the land. Close your eyes and imagine a lone lion, bathed in moonlight, leaving his mark on a village's heart. Can you feel the strength of that? His story wasn't just about surviving. It was about teaching that even in weakness there's room for greatness. Kwesi, the lion with the moon-shaped scar, wasn't just an animal. He was a four-legged teacher, showing the Masai Mara and the world that true strength lies not in claws but in the heart. His journey from glory to fall, from mud to redemption, proved that compassion and dignity can unite what fear divides. The sound of his final roars still echoes in the village's memories, like a hymn to solidarity. Have you ever stopped to think how an animal can change everything? Because Kwesi did, leaving a legacy that shines brighter than the savanna sun. The Masai Mara holds his footprints, and the farmers, Jabari, Kito, and Mama Aisha, carry his lessons. They learned that respecting nature is respecting oneself, and that hope blooms where there's courage. Sometimes the universe sends unlikely teachers, and Kwesi was one, a king who ruled not by power but by the kindness he inspired. Imagine a world where humans and animals look at each other with that same respect. Wouldn't that be incredible? If this story warmed your heart, the next video YouTube suggests will move you even more. Don't miss it. And listen, we want to know, have you ever had an animal that changed your life? Share it in the comments because every story matters. Until next time, may the savanna keep teaching us what truly matters.